And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to talk about Victor Wembenyama yet again. He's one of my favorite players to watch just because of how broken he is and just how overpowered he is as a player. I mean, he is a 7'4" point guard who can shoot the ball and play great defense and do everything on the court. And he's really fun to watch because it's if you play 2K, it's like looking at a my player that you generated that's just ridiculously overpowered. And he's a fan favorite in the NBA, and he's expected to do great things. He's expected to do great things. He is the next man up in this league. But I already talked about how he is clear-cut Rookie of the Year. There is absolutely no contest on who's going to win Rookie of the Year. It is going to be Victor, whether Chet fans like it or not. He is by far, right now the question really is if he's going to win Rookie of the Year unanimously, in my opinion, because he is clear-cut the Rookie of the Year. But he's also in talks for being the Defensive Player of the Year as well. And as a rookie, that is phenomenal. The fact that he's already in talks of being the best defender in the NBA as a rookie is astonishing. However, not many people really agree with that, despite Victor Wembenyama leading the NBA in blocks per game with, I believe it was 3.3 the last time I checked. So I'm just going to go ahead. One of those players that doesn't agree or doesn't think that Victor is going to win Defensive Player of the Year is Draymond Green. Now, Draymond Green, he's won the Defensive Player of the Year award himself. So he definitely knows what it takes to be a Defensive Player of the Year. So we're going to go ahead and deep dive exactly what he said and whether or not I agree with it or whether I don't agree with it. So the quote here is, "He'll have these numbers and he'll have opportunities to win Defensive Player of the Year. I personally don't think that it's this year. Even if Rudy Gobert wasn't having the year that he's having and their team wasn't having the season that they're having, I still don't think you can give that award to somebody who's on the 24th best defense in the league." Now, I genuinely understand where Draymond Green is coming from. And Defensive Player of the Year, it's sort of most valuable defender for a team. So if your defense leads to a bunch of wins, then that makes you the Defensive Player of the Year. And it makes sense because it's it shows just how impactful that center really is on the defense. And Rudy Gobert, he's won Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. And the reason why he won it was because the Utah Jazz were such a good defensive team when he was under center. And it makes sense when because again, the Spurs defense as a whole, it isn't that great. Again, 24th ranked defense and one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. So it makes sense how Draymond Green's mind would go to that, because when he won Defensive Player of the Year, the Golden State Warriors were actively winning games, and he got that award because they were winning games. So it made sense. And I'm just looking at this article real quick. In 56 games this season, he's averaged 20 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.3 steals, and leading with 3.4 blocks. So the blocks actually went up the last time I checked. And he leads the rookies in every single category aside from assists. That counts for the steals, steals averaged, total steals and steals averaged, along with total blocks and blocks averaged. So along with leading the NBA in blocks per game and total blocks, he's also 12th in rebounds per game and 14th in steals per game, 10th in defensive win shares, and third in defensive rating. Like as an individual player, he's ranked third in defensive rating. And as a rookie, that is phenomenal. Like, it's ridiculously impressive how like his defense is like immediately going into the league is just straps. It's just straight lockdown defense from him, and it's very, very impressive. But when comparing it to like the other competition with Rudy Gobert is averaging 12 rebounds and 2.1 blocks per game. But he also leads the NBA in defensive win shares and defensive rating. And the Timberwolves are 43-19 and have the NBA's best defense, allowing just 106.5 points per game, which is nearly 3 points per game better than any other team. So, with that in mind, and with what Draymond Green said, like, Rudy Gobert, he brings the value to this defensive team. It seems that every single team that Rudy Gobert has been on has been number one on the defensive side of the ball. And it's obviously like it's incredibly valuable like for a team. So it's not a question of like who is the better defender, it's whose defense brings value to the team. And when you look at it that way, it definitely seems like Rudy Gobert will be the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. However, looking at it on the other perspective, it's a team rating. Like, being the number one ranked team on the defensive side of the ball, despite the fact that you are the best defender on the team, it's still like a team accomplishment. And the rest of the team has to be good on the defensive side of the ball in order to be like the number one defensive team in the NBA. And like when you think about it, like Rudy Gobert, he can only do so much defending in the paint. And he has really like no outside control on if let's say some of the guards or some of the forwards decide to rotate or decide to leave their man open. He has no control over that. Similar to Victor Wembenyama, how he has no control over what his teammates do on the defensive side of the ball. He can only do so much, and he's trying to impact the defense as best as he can, getting the blocks and getting these steals, but he can only do so much because he can't guard all 5 players on the court. So when you look at it that way, it also like it doesn't really make much sense because Defensive Player of the Year is an individual accolade. So I'm sort of stuck, like, as to who I think is going to be the Defensive Player of the Year, because I understand Draymond's point of view, but I also understand like where Victor Wembenyama is coming from with this team, because again, he can't control like what his team does on the defense. He can only impact it so much, and I agree with Draymond and how it's going to like sort of impact it's going to impact like the voters and ultimately making a decision, because Rudy Gobert, when he was on the Jazz, number one defensive team. Now he's on the Timberwolves, number one defensive team. It's like it's a pattern, and it's a constant pattern with Rudy Gobert. Every single team that he's been on is the best defensive team. That is no coincidence. And when you put it that way, it sort of seems like Rudy Gobert is without a doubt the Defensive Player of the Year. And it's really difficult to tell. Like, let me know what you guys think about it in the comments, because right now I'm really like I'm actually really stumped with who I think is supposed to be the Defensive Player of the Year. Do I look at it from an individual standpoint, or do I look at it from team success like as a whole, and like the overall like defensive prowess that the team has? Like, it's really confusing, because like again, it's not just Rudy Gobert that's involved in like the defensive strategy every single time. It's also like the coaching and the fact that like the players that he plays with, like Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is a really good defender for the guard, and he's not lazy on the defensive side of the ball. So that also helps the Timberwolves and their defensive rating. The fact that Ant is a really good perimeter defender. along with all the other players that they have. And when I think about that, it sort of like makes me want to favor Victor a little bit more because his team is much more incompetent than Rudy Gobert's teams and have been in like the previous years. The Jazz, they weren't an incompetent team when Rudy Gobert was on there, and the Timberwolves, they aren't an incompetent team when he's on there. So, and not to mention, they also play Cat at the 4, so that also adds a lot more length and a lot more presence in the paint. And it, again, like, it does affect rotations, but it really hasn't seemed to affect the rotations that much because, again, they are the number 1 defensive team in the NBA. But it's the fact that, like, Victor Wembenyama has incompetent teammates that I really don't feel like that should hinder him in the voting, given how, like, he's leading the NBA in blocks. Like, 3.4 blocks per game as a rookie is not something to, like, just shrug off. Like, if a center was to average 3 blocks in a game, it's very rare now in this league, given how, like, 3-point heavy the NBA has become, and the fact that, like, a lot of people don't really go up in the paint as much as they did back then. That's why a lot of those players back then were able to average like 4 blocks per game or like 3.9 blocks per game. There was one season, I forgot exactly what season it was, but it was around in the 90s with Dikembe Mutombo. There were 4 players that averaged at least 3.8 blocks. And, like, we don't really see that often. Like, we don't really see centers average 3 blocks per game as often as we used to. And when it does happen, it's sort of like, I feel like it should be brought to everybody's attention by winning the Defensive Player of the Year. And he shouldn't be hindered just because of his own teammates' incompetence. But it might just be, like, my bias towards Victor. Like, I'm a really big fan of Victor, as I mentioned before at the beginning of this podcast. But again, we'll just have to see as the year progresses. Right now, it really seems like those two are sort of like neck and neck in terms of Defensive Player of the Year. And they might be neck and neck in terms of the media just because of like the media's overall opinion on Rudy Gobert. Not everybody is a fan of Rudy Gobert, seeing as how he shut the entire league down by spreading COVID-19. And the fact that his on-ball defense is really, really bad. And that's another thing that I completely forgot to talk about. We're running out of time, but I completely forgot about like Rudy Gobert's on-ball defense compared to Victor Wembenyama, who's also averaging a lot of steals. And Victor Wembenyama is a lot quicker on his feet, and he can also block defenders at the 3-point line. And I really think that's what separates him from a lot of great defenders, being able to block that 3-point shot with his length. Like, there's really nothing that like a shooter can do when Victor Wembanyama jumps and like goes up for that block, because it's going to be a block almost every time at the 3-point line. And that's what separates his defense from Rudy Gobert, in my opinion. The fact that he's dominant in the paint on defense, and he can also like go out there and guard those guards because he is quick on his feet. He's a lot quicker on his feet than Rudy Gobert. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. But with that, we are out of time, and that is the end of the show segment, and that is the end of the show. Thank you guys for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And before I end this segment, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description or the link that is displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. It is gsmcpodcast.net. Puts your donations and comments right in front of my screen. Helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. So once again, the link is gsmcpodcast.net. And that is the end of the show for everybody. Now, thank you once again for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson. And as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to